actually play live all the pieces of music that I've written academic papers on here at Rutgers. I thought it was a cool concept. They're mostly pieces I knew pretty well, and once I kind of got the program sort of finalized, I was like, all right, let's try it. So I thought about waiting until next semester after taking special studies in music history, which is the last music history course in the curriculum here that you have to take before graduating. And then I decided I don't feel like doing that. We're doing this now, and next year I'll be purely focusing on grad school auditions. This is where I come from, at least. This is how we got to this point. If you're not familiar with the curriculum here, lecture recitals, as they're traditionally known, are technically for doctorate students to present their thesis works as part of their degree. And usually you pick a piece or two, and then you have to come up with some extra sort of thesis. For every paper, let's see, we have a course called Music History 1. All sophomores are required to take it, but since the time I took it first, I didn't pass. It was sad. But in between me taking it and retaking it, it got changed to Western European music before the 1800s, which is such a mouthful. And then History 2 became known as after all the words and then after the 1800s. But I didn't have to retake History 2. I got a B the first time, which is fine. But yeah, first time I took it as a sophomore. Professor David Chapman, his prompt was pretty easy. He was like, pick a piece, write about it. That was it. And I originally picked the Mass of Notre Dame because that was one of the only pieces I could actually remember having interest in throughout my whole time, but we only studied 2 of the movements, and he said you could write about one of the other ones. And then I realized, through doing that research, I was force-feeding myself all of the information I didn't understand in the beginning of the semester on my computer for hours just trying to write a paper. So I set it aside, I picked something else. I picked the violin piece on the program, and I never thought about it again. And then for History 2, the prompt was pretty much the same. It was choose a piece and write about it. But for the second half of the paper, choose another piece and compare them. And that's it. So I did that on 2 pieces for the English horn, and again, didn't really think about it again. And then I retook History 1, and the Mass of Notre Dame was not in the curriculum anymore. We didn't learn about it in class. We learned of his existence and nothing else. We covered the composer pretty extensively. That's pretty standard across most universities that have music programs in the States. But which pieces that we study are a little different. So the prompt that Dr. Nicholas Chong, we love this man, the prompt that he came up with was write an argumentative essay about why this piece should be added to the curriculum. Pick any piece that was before the 1800s and cover and come up with a bunch of reasons. Want to specifically write about some of the pieces that were in before they changed the curriculum a little bit. You can, and he wrote specifically, you have to write about the Kyrie and or the Gloria of Mass of Notre Dame if you pick it. And I was like, well, I have a very unique perspective since I went through the class once, we learned about it extensively, and now I've gone through the class again. We didn't learn about it extensively, and I get to argue why we should. So I did. He hated my paper, but that's okay. All you need to know is I did a lot of research on it, and I was proud of the paper in the moment before he graded it. Then some things happened. I was in a class called National Security Politics. I was required for the policy track for my minor, the Critical Intelligence Studies minor. And then I wasn't in that class anymore for reasons unrelated to academics. But they put me in an independent studies section of research in critical intelligence, which is also required for the minor. And they said to make up for it, write a no more than 12-page paper about something. And I was like, what? And encouraged by my research advisors, they said, well, you're a music major, and critical intelligence seems kind of niche, but is there any places in history where those 2 worlds overlap? And I was like, oh yeah, there's plenty, but I don't know which one to write about. I actually, coincidentally, I wrote already my freshman year. It was a tiny paper I had to do in a week for a music tech class about the man who wrote, who invented the theremin, because he was a Russian spy for Stalin. And it was interesting because the first movie score I think that featured the theremin was written by Shostakovich, who famously hid Stalin until Stalin died, and he's kind of happier, I guess. But that wasn't really an American situation. Like, everyone's written a paper about that guy at this point. So I did some pre-research. I had like a whole list of instances, and I settled on Leonard Bernstein. He's the only composer I'm confident that every person who might be interested in coming to my recital would know about. Because even if you don't know about Candide, which is an operetta that we actually performed here at Rutgers like a year ago, please tell me everyone here has watched West Side Story. The extent of my Bernstein paper was a bit more focused in like, first I had to tell the whole story of like why the FBI looked into his life, because they did. And if you want to look up his file with the FBI, you're going to notice that's like 800 pages long, because they really, really, really wanted to prove to the world that he was a communist and he was a danger. And while he may have been a communist by the standards of then, he never really purposefully called himself a communist. He wasn't a danger, and he was really mad about it, and there was a whole thing, so it was fun to write about. There was plenty about it online. But yeah, so I realized if this is like a summation of all the time that I've spent as a performance major into a recital, then I wanted to prove that I was in fact listening to my oboe professor. The main ideas for today. So traditionally for lecture recitals, okay, I'm going to be honest, I didn't really know what to write for an overarching topic. I just know that that's traditionally on the program, and I wanted to honor that, so that's what it says on the program. Things that Dr. Chong told us that I'll never forget is how music nowadays is kind of a commodity. It's for some kind of mass appeal. It's for someone else. Also, the respect that we owe to composers. Now, this was a huge one that our oboe professor here has stuck into his students, is that the composer of whatever music you're playing, doesn't matter where they have been, where they are now, or what, they actually have a lot more authority in a performance space than we think of, because usually they're dead, so we don't really consciously know. I don't believe that the way that the curriculum is set up here for music and cultures, music history, all of these classes, it gets all the topics that are standards out of the way, and then it's kind of like out of sight, out of mind. No one wants to think about it again, because they're all hard classes. They don't instill enough importance to any of the majors here. The importance of context, and like, even if you find history to be the most boring thing alive, you can't just go in totally blind, even if you're really good at it. And one point I really hope to make throughout this lecture is, it doesn't matter if you're someone who believes your gifts came from somewhere or not, or if someone or something out there gave them to you. You have them if you acknowledge them and you want to use them, whether it's to make yourself or other people feel good. Going in blindly is about as bad as not having faith in yourself than having faith at all. And then once you've performed, or once you're planning a performance, or whatever it may be, how much does it matter? I think that's something that a lot of people, especially in school, struggle with. We feel like we're just going through one concert cycle after another concert cycle after another. We're just like, I have to learn all these notes, and I have to listen to this person, and I have to put up with this person, and you play the music, you have the concert, and if it's a good experience for you, great, and if not, you just go home, maybe you drink, and you cry out in bed, and just like, no one has to do anything. That's one of the main other ideas I wanted to put out there, is you really don't have to. But again, it's important to understand why someone else might, or why you might or should in any given situation. This list kept changing a lot, all these subcategories. The most recent one I wrote in was material versus application, and that will probably become more important soon. So when I say, what the specific category of music we're talking about today is what has been affectionately named by the faculty here, art music, Western art music. So when we say classical music, there's obviously the classical period of European music. Different kinds of music that we're taught about, mainly art music, and we make it clear the distinction between art music, folk music, vernacular music. Vernacular music, as we know, is like modern, popular, pop, or whatever, and sometimes we come to a crossroads sometimes where art music as we know it and like vernacular music as we know it and this is where things get really subjective. The point that writing music down. Because a lot of this music originated from just, people have been making music for a really long time. Let's talk about the first composer on the program. We had to get here first, is what I'm trying to say. Guillaume de Machaut was born in 1300. I cannot believe he lived to 77 years. The Black Death in Europe started in 1346, and he lived to 77. That's long for modern standards. I don't know what kind of person he must have been back then, but he at least knew something about what he was doing was somewhat important to himself at least, because we learn about him because he's the first known composer to actually write his name on stuff that he did. Before him, there's a lot of things going on in Europe, and this is like the densest part of the curriculum for Music History 1, why they needed to try to make it easier and more tangible, because like people were getting like 55s on average on quizzes, because it's just that hard to grasp. But the Ars Nova treatise happened around the time he was born, and so that's what he was kind of brought up with, and that's why he's the leading composer of that time. See, he stayed alive, clearly. But before the Ars Nova, there was some notation, but why they needed notation? Well, I'm later going to touch on how do you perform with other people and not fall apart. And there's plenty of theorists and whatever out there that hate the idea of bar lines, hate the idea of time signatures, key signatures, whatever, but there's a reason why it lasted this long. And notation is it's supposed to be an efficient way to preserve music that's going to keep being played, hopefully, and for it to be played or sung accurately. And also during his time, I need to make you guys understand how many rules I am breaking for putting this on my program the way I did. Purely vocal music back then was considered sinful and too indulgent, purely instrumental music, so that's why vocal music was preferred. It wasn't just because, oh, church choir pretty, we love God. No, there was more reasons to that. And before this, there was ancient Rome, there was also ancient Greece. Ancient Greece, we had Pythagoras. He's the one who really developed the idea of the diatonic scale as we know it today, which is why all of our textbooks start in ancient Greece. But he also had a lot of other crazy ideas, like saying that when all the planets and the sun and the moon align, that there's some like universal harmony that will there's like a whole chart online you can find. It's crazy, but what you do need to know is that he's the one who like helps us develop like music in fractions. Now, key signatures weren't quite a thing yet by Machaut's time. There's no key signature in this arrangement that I made. I literally just found a transcription of the piece and then put it into 3/4 instead of 3/2 for reading purposes, and then this is bad of me to do. I'm not Christian, but we need to talk about Mass as the ritual. I am condensing, this is so oversimplified. This part of the Mass that he set to text is the Kyrie in the Mass ordinary. There's also the Mass proper, and these are supposed to be sung every day in the Catholic Church. Everyone shows up for Mass. I think this is supposed to be played at like 9 in the morning. And at the end of this section of Mass is communion. According to the liturgical calendar, the proper would change, but the ordinary, the text and whatnot, never does. So that leads us to Mass, the genre. This kind of comes after Machaut, but this is where I come to the thesis of my research of why this piece should be in the curriculum still, why it should be added back. We focus more on Mass stuff after, like closer to the Renaissance, like after he dies, because the cyclic Mass suddenly becomes like a genre in religious music in Europe in the Renaissance. And the reason why Dr. Chong explained, scholars argue whether or not the Mass of Notre Dame is a true cyclic Mass. No, it's never going to be. The genre itself came about as a concept after he died. But can you categorize it that way? What do we write in our textbooks? How do we describe this work that he did? Because he's not around to do it for us anymore. And it was really important because the only earlier Mass we have that was written this way was not written by one composer. The Tournai Mass was actually a collection of different people's stuff put together. And it's not a cyclic Mass. To be a cyclic Mass, there needs to be something that connects all of the movements thematically. the two types we learn about are cantus firmus and paraphrase. And we get two different composers with two different masses to learn about these specific ones. Because one of them did the cantus firmus thing. He literally took a song that he once wrote, and then he just put it in the bass line, or the tenor. There wasn't SATB yet. And then he just put other stuff on top, and he also did a fancy thing because in medieval France, in the Notre Dame style of polyphony, my gosh, the concept of polyphony is a whole other lecture on its own, I can't get into this. It was all about rhythmic complexity. But how do you get people who have been brought up in church singing the most simple, mind-numbing tunes with like the Guidonian hand? They didn't even have like a little chart that says these are all of the keys and here's all of the solfege and whatnot. They literally had a thing where if you pointed out a spot in your hand, it meant like their version of solfege for one syllable, and then it was whatever. People argue that this is a cyclic mass because I'm not reading all of this. This is just here to prove that I know where this came from. This took me 2 years to understand. That this was written in motet style. What on earth is a motet? I still kind of don't know. I really don't. But it's a term for a certain idea of polyphony that came from this time period in this part of the world. And all you need to know is this last part, okay? It's just, you take a bunch of different rhythmic things and then you stack them on top of each other. Because before the show's time, also, there's a really long time where music could only be sung in threes. Like three, I'm not explaining meter today, I can't do it, but like everything that fits in 3 beats, if it can stack on top of each other, can be sung, it can be repeated, whatever. Because 3 is a sacred number, and I don't know. Okay, I don't. But yeah, so the Ars Nova notation is relative. Oh, this is just like an example of. This is a more of a visual example of what I just said. Okay, this is. If it's not enough to make it a cyclic mass, all of this that I have just said, all of this long-winded stuff that I've been stressing the importance of, I think alone, this is what I wrote in my paper, should be enough to have this be in the curriculum. Because the day that I learned the most in Dr. Chong's class was actually a day where he wasn't lecturing. I mean, I learned a lot when he lectures and I take a lot of notes, but it was a day where he told us all to discuss amongst ourselves, is Don Giovanni from Mozart's opera, the actual character that the opera's named after, is he a good guy or a bad guy? Is he a hero? Is he an anti-hero? What is he? And I learned so much just like talking to my classmates about it. Why couldn't we do that with this mass? That's what I wanted to do. I wanted to get up into my classmates' faces and be like, this is important. Even if it can't conceptually be tied to anything, because we learned motet stuff. We learned about the motet just with other of Machaut's works. But the fact that I learned so much from just stressing over this mass and how to do it justice intellectually, never mind performing it, I was like, this should be something we all need to go through at some point here. I think it's taught me a lot, and it's something that is kind of encouraged, but we've never been outright like told to be like, fight now. You get this point, and you need to prove to each other why you're wrong or right. And I always hated doing that in high school, and now I understand why we do it. Yeah, that this chart kind of just says it all. All right, that by the time that Machaut was around, like, you didn't really have 16th notes or anything. 16th notes only appear in my arrangement because it's just easier for us as people who are used to seeing tiny notes and tiny groupings of notes to be able to play this piece. In the Renaissance, yeah, they get a little more complicated, and the modern form starts to come around for the next piece on the program. I will touch up on everything that I've just said later, but this is kind of the basis of where all of my research has come from. This is where everything started, was trying to make sense of this. And just to hammer the point home, okay, this is what the real massive Notre Dame looks like. This is what we got from the little box of all of this stuff. That is how he wrote it. Can you read that? I can't. But this is more so how we can interpret it so we can read it, and then I simplified it because here's the thing. Over historical accuracy and actually being able to perform the thing, I choose actually being able to perform it. Once I found out who else was going to be playing in my recital, I tried to remember from my own experiences where they might be at this point, and I realized giving them that might freak them out. If you see like a little like circle thing on the very end of the staff, that's not a key signature that indicates like a church mode. We're not getting into that. I'm done. But yeah, no, I picked instruments that wouldn't clash with each other too much, and also based off of who was available, because it's kind of hard to schedule around a lot of people in a college. But I realized I originally was going to do Ross's part on oboe, and I was going to have another instrument do my part, and then I realized just timbre-wise it wasn't going to work out. And also, I learned after spending hours in music score, like note for note, I also had to do some voice changing, so voice leading doesn't come about until a little later, but Machaut actually followed a lot of those rules that are put in place later on his own. Like, he just did them, which is great, because then I didn't have to fix anything, so that no one would be like out of proportion from each other. I also needed to make sure that we all had room to breathe, because singers back then they started the thing, and then they just kept like, they just keep holding the note out, they keep going, and they go through it, and they can breathe when others aren't breathing. We can't really do that here. There's not really much, the way we all breathe in this instrumentation is actually very different from one another. You would know when one of us breathed in the middle of a phrase. So I also did some swapping in some of the lines. So whatever I have is not going to be exact. If you look up on IMSLP, like the original score, not the original, but like the one that's in 3/2, it's not going to be exact, like 1, 2, 3, 4 lines. Oboe's usually tuned. That's because the oboe itself is a really piercing sound of an instrument. That's why they picked it to always tune orchestras. English horn doesn't do that. And also, because I'm already breaking a lot of rules, to try and respect the time period Machaut comes from just a little more, I'm giving the bottom line, the tenor, technically the bass now, a little more importance. And so she's going to give our tuning note, and we're all going to blend to her rather than blending to the highest instrument. Yeah, no, I did that on purpose. Okay, the first chunk of this is actually repeated 3 times traditionally when done as a religious mass. And then there's like 2 variations of that part. And then I think the second part is like twice and not 3 times. It's a lot. And then each of the other parts of the Mass Ordinary have their own unique thing. And it's all very beautiful. Okay, if you do check out the piece and this kind of thing doesn't bore you to death, you probably have noticed, wow, that sounds medieval. Maybe we've all listened to those like medieval remixes of songs. And well, there's a reason for that. This is set in like 1 or 2 modes. Like modes are kind of flexible as long as everyone moved to the same place, everyone was in tune with each other. Yeah, you're probably never going to hear this piece be performed like this in a recital again, and you're definitely not going to hear it like this unless anyone out there is dying to have a copy of my specific arrangement for their recital. Also, I added this very recently because I saw this and I was like, this is exactly what I want to talk about in like one video. It's great. So there's a group called Urban Theory. If you've never heard of them, you might have heard them once before in your life and didn't know it was them. I think were they the seagulls in Finding Nemo? They were part of Finding Nemo. Like they helped with that a lot. I know that. Like how did music get preserved for so long before Machaut's time, before notation, before everything we know today? Well, music is just one kind of performing art. There's plenty more, and when you're performing in a group, like unless you are by your very lonesome, then you can technically do whatever you want as long as an audience is willing to hear it. Or you can be your own audience. If you're performing in a group of people, everyone's different. This is something that robots can't exactly replace because they're not going to make any money off of it if they are programmed to all sound and act the same. There's beauty to live music, and I'm about to prove why in a few seconds. Okay, I didn't get the point. No conductor. There is a sense of rhythm, though. They're counting in a consistent pattern. I always find that dancers always go to 8. We tend to like to do things in 4, but they always go all the way to 8, which is interesting because we tend to have 8-bar phrases in music. So while I don't 100% disagree with people who think that bar lines are not like it when it comes to just music theory in general. Maybe they think you're too limited, or we're all gonna get really I don't know, all what's it called? I forgot the words. Elitist, I suppose, about the way we've been. Again, there's a reason why this has lasted so long. So not to hate on Paul Hindemith or anyone in the Rutgers Wind Ensemble. We just performed 2 nights ago an arrangement for wind ensemble, his symphony orchestra piece, Symphonic Metamorphosis. Wonderful piece. The first time we read through it, it was a train wreck, because first of all, this person who arranged this piece definitely did not have as much knowledge of all of the instruments in the wind ensemble. I mean, I don't believe that there's a lot of them, as I did for my arrangement. I not only knew the instruments, I even knew the people I was going to be playing with. I knew everyone's personal preferences, personalities, and where they are, like how I can represent not just the music the best, but with the performance. They're doing it, no sheet music in their faces. They definitely had to have a way to memorize it though, and they have to have a way to keep it organized. So Paul Hindemith likes to do this thing where instead of rejecting bar lines entirely, he goes, as long as everyone hears the same thing, what everyone's reading, what if, as long as I don't know, whatever stays constant, as long as you set a constant meter, what if different parts have different time signatures at the same time? He's not 100% stupid for doing this, okay? It gets his points across. He does have a lot of cool music with a lot of notes, but how on earth did we rehearse the piece? We didn't really. All right, I'm gonna expose the reality of this kind of thing when, especially this percussion section, has completely different meter markings in measures than us, all in the same piece. What do you think is going to happen in our rehearsal time? We're going to spend a lot of time stopping, not playing the same place, not taking, it takes up a lot of time. And time is the thing that we as musicians decorate. All right, artists, painters, and whatnot, they decorate physical, literal space. Dancers decorate time and space, something we watch as it's going. Music is something we hear. I mean, of course, there's musicians like, what's her name, Lindsay Sterling, who will like do her like dancing and all that as like a visual component. But at the end of the day, the music that she's playing isn't the thing that you see. It's what you hear. And time is precious. This is something I'm going to touch on later with Bernstein. But for now, what I want to say is chamber music, as we know it, because large ensemble music, that involves a lot of people, like with the hymn piece, which is why I was a little frowning about it. When there's less people to communicate to at once, you can get a little more done within the time that you might be allotted for any intents and purposes. So that's why when I saw this, I was like, oh my gosh, like this is great. This is actually really cool. Because even if one person stepped out of line there, everyone figures it out. There's a visual component to that. So everyone at Mason Gross and Rutgers knows me as an oboist. I grew up as a classically trained violinist. I started oboe when I was 13. So I learned what's called Suzuki method. There's a lovely Japanese man who died at, I think, like 2012 or something. He died at the age of 100. He was amazing. He was a really amazing, what's it called, pedagogue? Is that the word for it? Yeah. And he developed his own school of violin teaching. There's a lot of people in history that do this. All right, Marcel Tabuteau established the entire foundation of like modern, like not just oboe playing, but like wind playing as we know it in America. So because Suzuki's Japanese and he's from Japan, this was definitely more Suzuki's teaching. It's come here, but I mean it originated in Asia. And one of the pieces, so there's like 10 books or something in the violin books. And in the 6th book, don't know why it's in the 6th book, don't know why it's the first piece in the 6th book. It's called La Folia. And the original version of it was written by this man, Arcangelo Corelli. So he's from the Baroque period of music, but he's, how to say, he taught the composers that we know the Baroque period for, like Vivaldi, mainly, and Bach. And a lot has happened in 300 years between Machaut and Corelli's careers. Tonality is the hot new thing, all right? Goodbye to church modes, goodbye to rhythmic modes that were stupid anyway. Like this is, modern music as we know it kind of, this is it. This is, because like during the Renaissance there was a huge just change in the way Western art music as we know it was developed. Instrumental music became okay, in fact, extremely common. Most of the stuff that they played was dance music or transcriptions from vocal music that was already being sung and whatnot, because now they had a way to write it down. It didn't have to be transmitted orally anymore, and you could do more things with it. You could add little flourishes, you could add whatever else, because it was all within a cohesive and like comprehensible format. If you and the person you're with, even if you guys speak different languages for some reason, I don't know if this actually happened very often, you guys could read the same kind of music theory. It was being more standardized. And the concept of a sonata came about. This is where symphonies and whatnot originate from. Sonata form, so the music theory term is 3 parts. The exposition. That is like your intro. These are the ideas that are going to be presented. You have the development. Things get a little weird. Most of the time you modulate, because now you can modulate easily. Equal temperament started becoming a thing, mainly, because now suddenly, if different parts of Europe were all tuning differently, we're all going to be stuck in our little areas. No one's going to want to go anywhere else to play or to hear music or whatever it may be. So A440 wasn't standard yet. Okay, they tuned a little flatter back then, but yeah, no, where does the role of a performer come? Well, you can have a job now. like a real, like, you're supporting yourself sort of job. Because beforehand you'd be hired by an institution like the church or a king or whatever, and you still were now, that was for composers. But the actual performer, well, now there's music that you are given that is written, and you can read it because you've been taught to since you were little for whatever reasons. And you can play it for people for reasons now. So what are the types of sonatas that would come about? So now little groups of people were going to play together, because opera became a huge thing before Corelli's time, and they had different instrument families mixed together. I don't really have any pretty pictures for this, but this just has the information. Corelli loved trio sonatas. He pretty much, if he ever wrote any vocal music, none of it survives. It's really fascinating. When I wrote my paper about his piece, I first had to, introduce the composer and talk about him, and he's still so widely known now, and it's really amazing when you think about the time period that he was from. But he's still he was very married to one of the philosophies at the time, which was that music could invoke emotions, passion, and in whether it's the players, but mainly the audience. People hearing it could feel a certain way. There was a group in France called the 14 Violins of the, or was it the 24 Violins of the King or something? And they sounded so beautiful together that some noble woman actually, it cured her depression. It made her smile. And no, he really believed in this. And he loved the trio sonata. You got two melodic instruments that sound like the human voice, but aren't the human voice. And you've got continuo. And this is why, this is an arrangement of this piece. If you look at IMSLP, a transcription of the very original of his violin sonatas, the quote-unquote piano part is one line in bass clef. There's going to be a lot of numbers. There's going to be a lot of, guess what? Improv isn't just for jazz musicians, guys. Gasp. Improv was a huge thing back then because they still wanted to be efficient. Okay? Unfortunately, unless you had all the money in the world, which before this point the church did, which is why there's so much church music and why they got to develop notation. You couldn't keep copying stuff. The copy machine wasn't available yet. There was a lot of things that weren't available. And improv was also a fun thing. It made live music even more fun. You weren't hearing the same thing every single time you heard it. Every time you heard the same piece, it would sound different. So the version we're playing, Suzuki himself came up with his own realization, a standardized realization of the of La Folia. There were two types of just any sonata, not just trio sonatas. So one could be in the church. Okay, church music was still a big deal. Most of the composers you know of were religious in some way, or a chamber. A chamber back then is going to be smaller than this. All right, it's like a classroom size, a rich person's living room is how we're told. But it could be played in other places, but it was mainly indoor music. Now, why I wanted to write about La Folia specifically for that paper. When we were learning about Corelli, Professor Chapman made it very clear, and so did Dr. Chong actually later on. Corelli didn't like virtuosic music. If you don't know what virtuosity is, when you make something hard to be hard, to show off that you can play hard things. He didn't really. He just didn't. He liked tuneful things, which is fine. There's nothing wrong with that. It was pretty common at the time. But back then, there were composers who really wanted to experiment with that, and they did, and it was cool. And there's a lot that came out. But yeah, no. So I found it strange because La Folia is a lot of little violin students' worst nightmare. It's a hard piece, and actually Suzuki's version is more close to the original than we can give him credit for. I compared them for this paper. La Folia is the name of a chord progression that came from Portuguese dance music. And there's a lot of debate on why it's named that. Some people say it comes from the word for crazy because that's how people were after dancing the dance or whatever, I don't know. It's pretty common for chord progression even now. I think I referenced some examples in my paper, there's a Britney Spears song that follows this. The version that he used I'm not surprised he used this version. It's called Later Folia by Wikipedia. Because the original one was just slightly different, it cadenced differently in the ends of phrases. And I wanted to write a whole paper on I looked through this piece to make sure that the whole time the piece follows this chord progression. Because if it doesn't, then scholars who say that this piece follows an ostinato are wrong. And it also just gave me stuff to add to the word count, I'm going to be honest, but it was cool to figure it out, because back then my theory knowledge, I mean, I'm still really not good at it, but like back then I was really limited. And so the fact that it became such a theory-heavy paper, I was very surprised. I got to variation number 14 before I started noticing differences. First of all, okay, I got different versions. There's the continuo as Corelli wrote it, and then here's a standard realized version for a keyboard or whatever instrument that might be accompanying the melody instrument. And I first looked at them, and the first one I was like, wow, this is really weird. And then I got to a more, like the realized version, I realized, oh, he's just expanding, how to say, I wish more of his work survived. I'm sure he wrote more violin sonatas. This is the last of the book, there's 12. This is number 12, and all of the other ones are pretty standard. This one is kind of in its own category, which is another reason why I wanted to write about it specifically. Because it really isn't very similar to the other ones. The other ones are very similar to like solo Bach, stuff that would later come about for violin, but that doesn't have continuo or anything. But yeah, no, Corelli really contributed a lot to our modern, like the way we know tonality now. Like without it, I mean, Bach was really known for his counterpoint and whatnot. Like there's a lot of things that wouldn't be possible or wouldn't be known the way it is now if it wasn't for the music that Corelli and other important composers of the time were writing and doing. Because Variation 14 looks like this in the Suzuki book. He wrote in embellishments that would have been pretty common for the soloists of the time. Any Baroque soloist at the time would have interpreted this specific variation, and you can see that the chords are mainly the same as the ones I analyzed before. But all the other variations are pretty similar. Suzuki just added a few things, and that's why it was so fascinating to me. Maybe Corelli made it so hard because he wanted to be writing a trio sonata. He really did, but I think he was probably commissioned to do one of these, and so he was like, what if I try to make a trio sonata, but it's only with 2 people? Because it actually takes like 4 people to do a trio sonata. That's what we're gonna perform next. This is gonna be great. Putting this with piano for the first time in my life was so rewarding, because I never did that growing up. This was not one of my, like, we call it NISMA, you guys call it like all-state regional stuff. But he gets more adventurous with the variations. Theme and variation was one of the most common things in Baroque. Yeah, I forgot what I was gonna say, it's fine. It's tune. sort of version of the setting that that kind of music would have been played in. So hooray, we've gotten so much farther to modern times from what it was before. We're going to music history 2. I decided this would be the most natural segue. Let's talk about this instrument. This is the English horn. I will be playing oboe later, but this is technically in the tenor range in the instrument family. There is, how to say it, you guys are probably more, everyone in this room is going to be more familiar with the flute family and the clarinet family than the oboe family. So the flute equivalent, the oboe is like in the same range as the modern flute. The piccolo has an equivalent in the oboe family. So naturally the alto flute, the bass flute, and whatever else, that they're also going to have some kind of. So this is not actually the alto oboe. All right, anyone who said that is totally wrong. The alto oboe is the oboe d'amore. It is between this and the regular oboe, but this used to look like that, and I so wish it still looked like this, because this thing is so long and heavy that, like, playing it like this, carpal tunnel was my best friend when we played Holst the Planets here, because there's a lot of hard stuff in there for the English horn specifically. But the straightened version came about for a couple of reasons. The main one is it's easier to fix. It's easier to manufacture. It's easier for people. If there's something that goes wrong, it's a lot easier to identify the problem than if it is one or a different, like a curved horn in different pieces. I don't think, in my opinion, it's not more ergonomic because classical music has been a boys' club for many centuries, so for the average person who was playing this instrument in a professional setting was going to be a dude that would be like 3 times bigger than me. So for them, it's probably no problem. I want to say it's similar. It's the English part itself. It makes such a unique sound that a lot of its like range equivalents in other instrument families do. So it got really popular, especially in like the Romantic period. There was always we love our token English horn solo in like a romantic to like neoclassical era piece where things get real quiet towards the end of a piece and you hear beautiful, hopefully, sound coming from almost nowhere, and it's amazing. It's not English and it's not a horn. That was my favorite thing to write in my paper because I opened it with background on the instrument itself. I was going to write about 2 pieces for it. The story I knew was that, like, because I took French in high school, the word for English and the word for angled in French sound the same, they're not spelled the same, and so mistranslation. But there's also a mistranslation from Germany, because, the word for English and the word for angelic sound almost exactly the same. The reed looks different than an oboe reed. It sticks to a vocal, so yeah, that's right, bassoons aren't the only instruments out there with vocals. It's a good time. A common thing that happens, especially in music schools where we're all close together, we all know each other. Maybe you want to play something, and it's not out there, or you just really want someone to write something for you. You need to ask somebody who can write music. Now, there are people who play music that they write, but oftentimes, unless you are only writing solo music, you are going to be writing for a lot of instruments that aren't your own in a lot of groups, and you need it to sound cohesive. But I'm not here to talk about composing, but more the relationship we have with composers. Their work doesn't get heard unless someone plays it. It doesn't have to be them. Usually isn't. But sometimes we as performers take the initiative and ask. So, I mean, it's a common thing. This has been around since the dawn of history. People ask for paintings painted of them all the time, even now. Or like, you need someone to choreograph a dance number for you. You can't choreograph, but you can dance. Or you can't do either of those things, and you really want this as part of it. So, this is something that Rutgers does really well. We have a strong emphasis in collaborative art making, music making, whatever, collaborative stuff here in our curriculum now. It's actually plugged into the curriculum. They're working on it, but it's here now. And yeah, again, this is a huge part of what we do. So the pieces that I picked for that paper, I've worked on Chrysalis by Alyssa for many years. It was introduced to me by my teacher in high school, and then Spaghetti Western I found on a whim. Actually, I found the information about Spaghetti Western on her website. So she's the one who commissioned Chrysalis from Alyssa Morris, who we're going to talk about. And Harold Smoller, I didn't even know that Spaghetti Western was commissioned. I had to dig deep for that one, but so she's someone who actually plays her own music. And what's interesting is, as I've gone through a music degree, you start to be able to notice things that only you would be able to notice about music written for your instrument, i.e. clues on whether or not this composer has any idea how to play your instrument. Sometimes they don't know. They do not. There are some composers out there that don't play an instrument at all. I'm looking at you, John Mackey. Oftentimes they're stupid hard parts, especially now in the age of technology. So yeah, okay, we've skipped dozens and dozens of weeks worth of music history. We've gotten to the 20th, 21st century. Hooray! She's still alive. She's the same age as our head of composition here, Scott Ordway. I once attended a master class where my teacher at the time played the second movement of Chrysalis for her online, and she had a lot of really cool comments. And she grew up playing piano and oboe. So guess what? As Jess and I have been exploring more and more of this piece together, we noticed she does a lot of things that make it a lot easier for 2 instruments like ours to play together. There are spots where Jess will stop so I have a little more room to play something hard. And she has very logical places to breathe, while also being able to express her own ideas. It's still a hard piece. Spaghetti Western is not the same, but I mentioned Germany earlier. It was going to be a great segue, and I didn't do it. But a concept that originates kind of in, I almost just said the second Viennese School of Music. I might be right, but I don't want to start naming things. Just know that there were a lot of schools that came about. That's how we got here today. People had to pass on skills to each other. And one part of Germany really liked something called programmatic music that came about. So it's exactly what it sounds like. You have a program right there. Generally, programs are longer. They have a lot of descriptions of the things that are being played and whatever else. There's a story. They really liked performing music that meant something, like really meant something. They didn't believe that absolute music, meaning like just music as it is out there, could exist if a human wrote it, I guess. Like they did not believe that could be a real thing. So this is where we get into music theory. It is a term in music theory, absolute music. But what's argued about is you could write a piece with absolutely nothing specific in mind, like a story or whatever. But anyway, Chrysalis very much follows a story, and it's one that we all know very well. When a caterpillar is born, it eats a lot, and then it becomes something called a chrysalis. And then after a while, a butterfly emerges. And something I learned about Alyssa Morris through studying this piece is that she's religious. She writes in her program notes succinctly stuff about story of God and his creations. So this is how Chrysalis is set up. We get introduced to this theme that she is very strongly inspired by the tune for Simple Gifts and what is like the God or King and all creatures something. And I know like Davis Maslanka also uses that in one of his symphonies. And it gets, no pun intended, it evolves throughout the piece. It changes. And the end result is not going to be the same, but it's a journey that is, so this is something I already talked about, but that's the main quote that is from her program, The Butterfly of Six Praises to God Who Gives It Wings to Fly. That is a specific point in the third movement that she's referencing. So yeah, this is extremely programmatic music. If you look up all of the definitions, this very much fits it. All right, Michael Daugherty. He's also still alive. We just played one of his pieces actually for the Wind Ensemble concert. And everything that he did in that piece, a lot of those same motifs exist in Spaghetti Western, so I don't feel special anymore, but that's okay. He very much does not play almost any of the instruments that he features, even in the orchestra for Spaghetti Western. Jess and Lukas are nodding because through rehearsing this piece, we learned the hard way. He doesn't play any of our instruments. Instead of following a very set plot, the theme sort of, I actually play a character. This is interesting. The way that he approaches programmatic music is the theme for Spaghetti Western is called The Man with No Name. If you don't know what a Spaghetti Western is, it's a type of cowboy movie, but it's very specific because it's directed by Sergio Leone, I think, and he really, really liked collaborating with composer Ennio Morricone. It's like how Spielberg really likes John Williams to write for him. They had a very close relationship, and they made a lot of Clint Eastwood movies where, there's a lot of stereotypes involved with his character. He's a gunslinging sort of hero who acts kind of mysterious and dark, and probably has a showdown with somebody in a ghost town. That sort of thing. And I'm only playing the first movement of that, so I'm going to talk a little bit more about the other movements, because I just thought I'd rather die than learn like 2 full 3-movement pieces for English horn in a month. The second movement is mainly strings with the English horn, and it's called the Phantom Stagecoach. I don't even think the Man with No Name as a character really appears. It is purely world building, if you know that term. And the third movement is it's called At High Noon, and it's supposed to be about a duel. There's mariachi trumpets, there's a lot of percussion, I used to think it was like a dance, the way it was written. And then I realized The key difference between these two pieces. We follow the caterpillar exclusively throughout its journey in Chrysalis. The man with no name just appears. He just exists in this world, and the orchestra builds the world around him. We don't get to know him as a character. We don't watch him do anything. He's going on an adventure, but not one of transformation. He's set in himself. And so I realized, oh, the third movement is where you actually kind of get to know him a little bit, because it has some very introspective moments that are a nod to the first movement, but are very quiet, and they seem like an anxious person contained in his thoughts, and you realize he's actually scared to go into this duel with someone else. The fact that I'm getting all of this from listening and analyzing music is insane, and that is why I wanted to write about them both, because music has developed so much at this point. They're really involving the audience. People are writing this music for audiences to be hooked on every note, to feel something, to really want to come back again, to talk about it, and to learn something maybe. It's like watching a movie but there's no picture, I guess. I can't do that, I'm sorry. But no, it was really cool when I realized, oh, but he's about to go into battle. The movement just ends. You don't get to know how it ends. You just finally get to know that him as a character, he's actually a lot more human than you would think when you watch a movie like a spaghetti western cowboy movie. When I had to write the comparative thesis for the paper, and this is why it's one of my favorite papers I've written. This is the main idea I came up with. When I first heard Chrysalis, it really moved me. I connected with it. It meant a lot to me. There are true emotions that you feel when you read the program and you realize, oh my gosh, it is a journey of transformation. It is it's something that we can all relate to. It's the concept of the transformation of a caterpillar to a butterfly can be applied to life. We all kind of start as caterpillars at some point in our life. And this is a very common concept in a lot of cultures, a lot of religions and whatnot. And that's when I realized it doesn't matter if I'm religious as well too. It doesn't matter if you are either. The fact that she wrote this with such religious context, maybe I don't agree with everything that she believes, but this is why I say learning context is so important. Because anyone could just play this piece just to show off, any of these pieces. And just that purely for themselves and purely to get the applause and feel good about themselves. But it's so much more meaningful when you try to develop a relationship with an audience, because you're never going to have the same audience for the same show, ever. It also expects something of the audience. If you're coming to see a show and you know this is on the program and you're reading about it, you're probably a certain kind of person they're thinking of. Maybe you're a music student. Maybe you're some person's parents and you showed up to their recital and you really want to support them or whatever it may be. They have this sort of expectation, and that's where a lot of elitism in the world of classical music kind of comes about, that it's high art and only people educated a certain way can understand. It was a really fun thing to learn through researching these pieces. Is even if I never get to meet these composers, how much more meaningful it is now for me as a performer to share the music with you guys. Yes, I worked really hard on these. These are hard pieces, but it isn't just to reap some benefit of a reward. It actually it brings the performer on the journey too. These are only a fraction of what they write. Okay, when I get a score in the mail and I read through it, they have notes usually especially when it's pieces like this, and they will write paragraph after paragraph. Even if you can't intuitively figure out the meaning of the piece yourself, maybe you've never heard of a spaghetti western before, they really want to make sure you know. This is one of those pieces, someone brought it to Oboe camp the year I went, and suddenly everyone wanted to play it too, even though it's wicked hard. And that's kind of how I got hooked onto it too. But it's, yeah, if you're not familiar with Alyssa Morris, there's so much of her work is based in her childhood listening to jazz, blues, but also being a classical musician. All right, let's beforehand is just like, early, when, from that video we watched of the people with the of urban theory, one thing you learn the hard way, when I say material versus application in my main ideas, you have something, how are you going to use it? And depending on what you're using it for, you might need to make some changes. So in this case, I am not with an orchestra. This is a piano reduction. If you don't know what that means, it is exactly what it sounds like. A composer will, for just purposes in general, will take their whole orchestra score and try to plug the important things into a piano. So that, you know, maybe you're auditioning to play with an orchestra, so you have something to do that with. And the first 8 measures of Spaghetti Western is actually a tuba solo, and it is written out completely in the piano. I cut it to save time and energy, and it just doesn't hit the same when that graduate tuba player who's worked his whole life to be in that seat to really enjoy it. And also, in the piano reduction, there are percussion marks. There are these little X's as notes. And they say, tap the wood of the piano. That's supposed to be a bass drum. I went back and listened to the recording, and I was like, in what world is you going to a piano going to make anywhere remotely close to the sound of a drum? So we improvised. I texted Lukas. I was like, you said you're coming to my recital. Can you do a favor for me? And so luckily this drum lives here. So we turned this into a chamber piece, which is, again, plot twist, but yeah. This is just a small scale of sometimes you need pieces. You need music for a certain purpose. Maybe you're playing a wedding, and the bride doesn't understand that by getting a classical string trio, they're not going to have a readily available version of the song from Twilight, 1,000 Years I think it is, just to play legally. So it helps in a trio to have someone who's good at arranging music, so you can give the bride what she wants and get paid and never talk about it again, because you really shouldn't be doing that. You shouldn't be copying copyrighted material without permission for use, but that's a whole nother lecture that we're not doing today. I hate this weather, but we're getting through it together. maybe, talking about how the government was so convinced that Leonard Bernstein was a commie that they put him on a list that said that if he did anything suspicious that they would like put him in camp or something. I don't know. Like the Red Scare was a time. We did not. Most of us. I don't think anyone in this room lived during America during that time. I mean, yeah, he's got to be one of the more well-known ones. We're dialing it back a couple of years, obviously. Like he lived before both Morris and Daugherty's like time, I guess. He was quite a guy. His kids have still to this day do their best to carry on his memory and honor him, and they have websites and a lot of interviews and all sorts of things for him. Bulk of my research was just talking about, again, the FBI looking into him and why, like, he had to write a whole paper to, like, not get blacklisted by the CBS or something anymore, and there's a lot. There's even, like, it turns out after, there's, like, an act of something, I don't remember the name of it, that the government did, where people who were looked at, like, observed in America during the Red Scare, they could actually see their file somewhere. They could actually see. After he wrote his theatrical work, Mass, if you're not familiar with Mass, it's so interesting to come full circle. He also set like the sort of Mass ordinary, not the proper, I don't think, but he set a lot of biblical texts to a lot of different genres that have nothing to do with religion, and he explored the idea of the place that faith has in a world that grows increasingly faithless, which sounds pretty modern even now. And even though he was very much Jewish, he wrote Mass because Jackie Kennedy, her husband, was the first Catholic president of the United States, and when they opened the Kennedy Center, they wanted a big work in his honor to premiere there. People hated it, and to this day, people still don't like Mass. And as the kids call it now, they call it mid at best. Yeah, this was the big thing that I wrote about my paper, is that for a while, they were suspicious of him being a commie, and then McCarthyism was like kind of over-ish. He wrote Candide about McCarthyism. It is a comic opera. I wrote about this in my paper. A comic opera, as we are taught in class, is a specific type of opera that is set in like a historical setting but deals with modern discourse, and Candide was very much that at the time. The story that Candide is by Voltaire, who lived in like the 1700s, I believe, but it is a wild opera. Let me tell you that right now. When we did it a year ago, I remember sitting in the front row with my friends in the audience going the whole time. It's in English, so I mean they had the subtitles, but like just as they were singing, the more and more I was just shocked. I mean it is so, how to say it? He really liked making his music outrageous. He really wanted things to be out there. He wanted not just for people to think about it, but like people to be yelling in his face. I feel like he enjoyed it. He might not have actually, there's like themes about like sexual exploitation, like poor sex ed in schools, and like war, ST. There's like an 8-minute song about syphilis, and it is wild. It is like the way they staged it too for our production. I was like, oh my god. That gentleman on the right was one of the leaders of one of the big Black Panther organizations. If you don't know who Black Panthers were, during the Civil Rights Movement, MLK Jr. was not the only person out there. Whether on TV or not fighting, he used peaceful manners. The Black Panther were not known for being peaceful, and so Leonard Bernstein, he finally gets not blacklisted by the CBS by writing like a 14-page letter about how he's not a communist, and then he lies low for a while, and then suddenly, in like the 60s, this happens. He has the Black Panthers over for a fundraiser party. Actually, his wife organized it. It wasn't really just him, and they really wanted to keep the press out of it. It was like some Black Panther members went to jail, and rightfully they wanted to pay the bail. They eventually were released anyway. I don't think the bail ever actually came out of this party, but this was a big deal because even though Felicia Bernstein was so like tough about not letting the press in, a few journalists slipped in, and they wrote some things. Yeah, they wrote some things, and picketers would be at Bernstein's door for many years. There would be piles of hate mail, and it turns out a lot of those, like a huge portion of those, were actually FBI planted. So just because I'm studying history doesn't mean I'm proud of everything that's happening. And we learn history so that it doesn't repeat itself. Of course, there's going to still be the weirdos that look at it as something to be repeated. The point of it is so that good people can make a difference in the world, hopefully, and not them. I just filled a whole slide of just like people's reviews then and now about Mass specifically, since I think that time, he wrote Mass after the Black Panther incident. The government at the time was really trying to divide the African American, Black ethnic groups and Jewish, and there's a lot going on back then. It was a totally different social world in the States, but yeah, he kind of was just, people kept calling him not Jewish enough. There's a lot of things I wrote about, and he kind of just realized, I'm about to prove to the whole nation there is no way to make any singular thing that can please everybody. This is where I get to the main ideas from my first slide about mass appeal and a greater impact, and what part we as performers have in it. Because at the end of the day, there were performers on stage who did this. They're not nameless people. You can probably find the program from the premiere of Mass, and you can read all the names and the education and wherever all these people came from. But they're not the ones who are talked about specifically. This is all just to hate on Bernstein and his work. And Mass is particularly diverse in all of it's got a little bit of everything, and it hits the Kennedy Center, and it is hated. When I first started the paper, Trump hadn't been inaugurated yet. And after his inauguration, he made a lot of changes, including taking over the Kennedy Center. And some artists like Lin-Manuel Miranda, maybe you've heard of him, had a lot of things to say about that. Miranda specifically just said, oh, Hamilton's boycotting this BS. The Kennedy Center is supposed to represent music for everyone in the States, and now it's just not for everyone anymore. Because there's a big anniversary concert coming up, or maybe it's already happened. And I wrote about all that. I had to. I was like, there's no way I can't. This is the current events part of my paper. I was so lucky the timing of the research paper. I wanted to actually hear this music at some point, so I found these arrangements for piano and oboe online for Bernstein songs. Just some, a few fan favorites. Maria's in here tonight from West Side Story. Lucky to Be from On the Town. Maybe playing one of the ones from Candide, because originally I wanted to get a chamber group together to play the overture to Candide, and then realized that's practically impossible. I wasn't going to demand that of anybody. But no, at this point I realized, all the things I've been talking about, people could tell me it's niche, but I really wanted to say that it's not, because even if you don't know a single thing about what was going on in Leonard Bernstein's life, I sure didn't for the longest time, I'm pretty sure every single person in the world knew that this was going on when it happened. Even if you don't know who Kendrick Lamar is, most of the world likes to watch the Super Bowl, that I know of. He did a lot. I wrote paragraphs about this in my paper. I was like, oh my gosh, this is amazing. When I was watching it, when I watched all the analyses and all the things that were coming out the moment it happened, I was like, oh my god, I have to write about this. I reached out to my research advisor, hey, you're gonna have to wait another week or two because this is important. What he did was just a huge, on a large scale, an example of what the modern artist can do today in a social atmosphere. Because through his own work, this is stuff that he wrote, that he sung, and instead of just doing what most Super Bowl headliners do, which is just sing all their hits with all the fireworks and all the fun, he sang most of his hits, don't get me wrong, but he had an overarching theme throughout it, and gosh, I could just talk forever about this man, he's so smart. But it was impactful, but it was something that I needed to write about in my paper, because no matter what, Bernstein was known to be a social justice person. But no matter what you see on TV, there were people after the Super Bowl who were saying that Kendrick Lamar didn't go hard enough, that he could have done more with his themes, that he could have done more against white supremacy and history of oh my gosh, segregation and all those things. I'm sorry to tell anybody who needed to hear this, but if anyone actually thought that he was going to rap so good that Trump was just going to go, nah, you're wrong. Because everything you ever see televised, and he makes a point to rap about this, but even so, it's kind of TVception, everything you ever see televised has been thoroughly reviewed by a corporate lawyer for your consumption. And I wrote this in my paper because I wanted to compare both cases just in case anyone thought, oh, well, Bernstein's dead. That was a different time. And the concept of Western art music, so niche. Why are you talking about it this way? The main point that both of them make in their times in their respective ways, art can save lives, but entertainment is not a form of salvation. No one person can change everything. It doesn't matter if you're a musician, a politician, the king, the pope, whatever. No one can change everything. But no one has to be like, I'm good at doing this thing, and I'm gonna go and make a difference. You don't have to use your gifts that way. But no matter what, you have to understand as a performer, just in the act of even just listening to someone's music, well, like streaming them on their phone, or performing, a lot of people like to boycott Wagner. Okay, Wagner, he was a great composer, but he was known to be not so politically correct when it came to Jewish people. And a lot of people boycott him, a lot of people play. There are some people who even, there are Jewish fans of him who will listen to him in spite of that. But the only way to delete his beliefs completely or delete whatever he did is to not play his music at all. You have to understand something that I wish people would tell me in school rather than I just found out because I wanted to do a recital and I like to talk, is by playing anyone's music, by playing your own music, whatever you're doing, in any capacity, even if you're doing it in protest, the simple act of that still carries on everything that someone who did that art lived for, stood for, or still do, all right? If you play religious music and you're not religious, you're still contributing to, I'm bringing back the idea slide, you're still contributing to the spread of it in some capacity. Maybe it's not on the larger scale, okay? I highly doubt anyone's gonna turn Christian because we played an arrangement I made of Mass, all right? But even so, you're helping them live on, even those who are dead. And that was something I touched on when I premiered a piece that I commissioned from a friend of mine. That I wrote, I had her write it in honors of like some of my family members who have passed. And I said at the premiere, we're not what's left of those who came before us. We are, on the basis of family, we are everything that they worked for, everything that they sacrificed for, everything, and we living on still continue everything that they did. And on a larger scale, yeah, I mean, what Kendrick Lamar did changed a lot of things. I mean, like, the internet was never the same forever, that's for sure. Smaller scale, just me telling you guys about this. Who knows where you guys are gonna go after this? Wherever in your lives, or wherever in the world, maybe you're just going home and going to bed, that's fine. But like, either way, now this information has been passed to you, and you could pass it on in some capacity too, because I chose to do it. Maybe it was just for fun, maybe it wasn't, but that was the main point that I wanted to finally close together. I realized when planning this whole recital and like finding links between all the research that I had done on various periods of music and different composers and whatnot, is that no matter how much, if I write a whole paper hating on somebody, I'm still talking about them. I'm still acknowledging they exist. I'm still acknowledging, and by acknowledging that they exist, everything that they believe, everything that they have done lives on too. And yeah, that's why, even if you're not politically active, you're not using your gifts to try and change the world, again, you're still doing something, whether you know it or not. And that's why context is so important. It's so important for us to learn. It's so easy to get caught up in this music history and be like, I just need to pass this quiz and I never have to think about this again. Oh my God, I don't want to fail. But it's there for a reason. We learn it for a reason. No one has to be an Einstein when it comes to performing, doing programmatic music, etc. But even if you're just playing like Twinkle Twinkle Little Star in your living room or something, like that still does something. Because, well, I don't know you know, I don't think all of the people that I know believe the same thing. That would be very impressive. Everyone's different. No matter what you believe in, no matter who you worship or who you think is the best or what it might be, while no one person can do everything, we decorate time. Time is a resource. Resources on this planet are limited. I don't know a single person who doesn't want tomorrow to be better. Even the most depressed person I've ever met always hopes for another day that's hopefully better than the one that they lived on any given day. Yeah, no one is guaranteed tomorrow, but everyone has a right to a better tomorrow. That was like, I felt so smart writing that. And having the gift to do something is one part, but having the privilege to get to do it for people, this is great. This is probably one of the coolest things I think I've ever done, because, well, I got to, and I made it work. And I would have felt fulfilled just with my own performance, but even just hearing one person tell me that now they want to do some kind of lecture or something, they want to share their ideas as well as their work, like that makes me feel so fulfilled just as a person. And also, that's a brick that I painted in high school. Sorry, I thought I should explain that picture. It's like symbolic of the point I'm trying to make. If anyone's kind of lost, it's just that my AP literature teacher has this. He's been at that school for so long. He knows he's not going anywhere, and all of the bricks in his office were painted white at some point. So every year he lets graduating seniors or whoever takes his class to paint whatever they want on any brick. So I picked one. And I'm not really that good of a painter, but I did that, and it's there now. So even if no one knows who I am, there's dozens of students who have gone through that classroom since I've left, and many more to come. They'll see it. Maybe I'll make them think something. Maybe you won't. Maybe they're asleep in class, but that's still an opportunity that they have. I hope this has given everyone who's come here a little something to think about, or sleep on, or whatever it might be. Because at the end of the day, all of these ideas are not as modern as I may make them sound. Humanity's been around for centuries, as I've proven today. There's an Einstein in every generation, as they say, but we all got here somehow. We're all still alive somehow. The planet's not run out of resources yet, somehow. But thank you all so much for coming, for staying for, how long has it been, like 2 hours? I don't want to think about it, okay? I'm going to have a mental breakdown over this. I'm going to be standing in the shower like, how could I have done this to people? But yeah, no, I just picked a few that I liked. I put them in like a little movement format. It should be fine. Hopefully they're tunes you know. If they're not, I guess you're about to learn something new.
Thank you.